Of all the bedtime parables about children being devoured by carnivores, I guess The Boy Who Cried Wolf is my favorite, but that story only really works if it's the same kid on wolf duty all week, right? Like, it's a much more fucked up story if little Andy goes out one night and yells wolf just to fuck with everybody, then little Bobby goes out and does it again the next night, then Chucky does it the next night, and then Davy goes out the next night and sees a real wolf, right? And that parable, the one too gruesome and fatalistic for anyone to bother writing, turns out to be the appropriate one for our present circumstance. And the parts of Andy, Bobby, and Chucky will be played by William Miller, Hal Lindsey, and Harold Camping, and the part of Davy will be played by the overwhelming majority of climate scientists. See, scientists by their very nature are understated. Colloquially, people talk in certainties, but scientists talk in error bars. It's a hallmark of scientific communication to never overstate the evidence, almost to a fault, right? Like, even when their level of confidence is functionally indistinguishable from certainty, they'll still call it sigma something. That's why you got atheists walking around talking about being 6.998s on the Dawkins scale. Scientifically minded people avoid absolute declarations. Scientific papers seem to be in an active competition for least sensationalist title. So when these motherfuckers start screaming, holy shit, we're all going to die, we should damn well sit up and listen. But we're not. And a lot of the reason that we're not is that while scientists were careful not to ever exaggerate their findings and couch their declarations in appropriate academic humility, Andy, Bobby, and Chucky were scouring their thesauruses for the most bombastic adjectives English had to offer over every stupid fucking thing that annoyed them. Women voting, interracial marriage, television, video games, the Teletubbies, whatever it was, it earned the most flamboyant and unrestrained rhetoric. It would be a harbinger of doom. It would be the death of humanity. It would be the end of the world, and not just any old end, but one with zombies and blood to the horses' bridles and dogs and cats living together and shit. Even their end of the world had to be ornamented with comically inflated imagery. And so when Poindexter starts using the barest hint of that language to describe a real apocalypse scenario, we, the information-consuming public, have heard way worse. We've lived through way worse. We've lived through ends of the world that were supposed to have dragons and scorpion horse locusts. How worried can we really be about an apocalypse that's just wet? Now, some people will push back on my effort to exonerate science here, but a lot of that's because they didn't really interact with scientists so much as science journalists. And while some of them are really good, a lot of them exist solely to pluck out all those carefully worded caveats and present the most bone-chilling and/or miraculous-sounding version of events they can get away with. The scientists say, hey, these invasive bees are moving northward, and the journalists say, these killer bees are coming for your children. So maybe you start thinking back over the apocalypses you've survived, and you say, hey, wait a minute, wasn't it the scientists that got us all freaked out over Y2K? But even there, their names are unsullied. What the scientists said was, hey, we fucked up all these computers, and if we don't fix them, they're going to think it's 1900, and they were right. So we fixed them, mostly. But then that warning got filtered through Chicken Little journalism, religious fervor, and the conspiratorial thinking that basically defined the 90s, and suddenly it becomes an end-of-the-world Jesus is coming type moment that passes like the Great Disappointment. But this time, with the climate change shit, it's for real. Davy's always been our most trustworthy wolf scout, and he's screaming wolf at the top of his lungs, but we're not listening. We can't even hear him because somebody screaming wolf has just become background noise in our modern society. We've grown numb to the most terrifying possible thing to grow numb to. And to a certain extent, I can almost forgive the doom criers that got this ball rolling back in the days when the greatest feat of human ingenuity was a really tall pile of bricks. If the world was going to end back then, it wasn't going to be because anything we were doing and there was nothing we were going to do that would have stopped it. Back then, making shit up about the end of the world didn't have the same downside. Of course, as any Millerite wishing they still had a farm on October 23rd of 1844 could tell you, there was still a downside, right? But it was the kind of downside that could only punish those idiots that listened to William Miller. And when The Boy Who Cried Wolf is the only one that's getting eaten, the story's a little easier to take. But in the modern day, and let's start that modern day clock ticking with a flash of light in Alamogordo, false apocalypse alarms take on a whole new level of insidious because we actually can end the world now, both through our actions and through our inaction. And when the smart people who have always gone to great lengths not to overstate their findings start talking about tens of millions of people dying and societal upheaval across the globe, they shouldn't be competing for time with people warning about the danger of gay pride parades and lustful song lyrics. And they damn sure shouldn't be reduced to using the same language. But that's the universe we live in. A universe where the average person is ignoring the doctor that tells them they have cancer because the homeopaths that said that before were wrong. And if anything can bring about the end of the fucking world, I feel like that's going to do the trick.